Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to my presentation. We're wired differently, how to talk about your neurodiversity with your employer and coworkers. A little bit about me. I'm the Apple Jamf Engineer at McGraw Hill. I got just a little bit over 20 years of experience in IT. And the last 10, 11 years or so, I've been focused into the Mac space. And I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 19. Also, before we get started, a couple of disclaimers. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not here to give advice in that context. These are all my personal experiences only. It's not affiliated, no corporate affiliation, so not affiliated with my company in any way, shape, or form. And what has worked for me may not necessarily work for everybody, and your experience may vary. So what we're going to talk about today is what neurodiversity is and isn't, some common challenges in the workplace, how to advocate for yourself and others, excuse me, remote, and your rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And then advocating for others. I jumped ahead. Yeah, that happens. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have a little time if we want to have any discussions, anybody has questions, want to share stories, that kind of thing. All right, so let's get into this. So what the heck is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is a term that was coined in the late 1990s. And it's all about the idea that neurological differences like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and others are natural variations of the human brain. Not flaws or disorders that need to be fixed. So there's the neurodivergent, which we've all heard of, but there's also neurotypical, and that would be your normal people. And I have normal in quotes because aren't we all just a little bit neurodivergent at times? But what this means, for most people, they can start a task, work through a task, finish a task. Deal with distractions, all that stuff. The neurodivergent brain, however, it's a little bit more complicated. And this covers, neurodivergence, as I said, covers ADHD, covers autism spectrum disorders, and many more. It's a fairly large list. One of the biggest things that people with ADHD and ASD deal with is executive function disorders, or ADHD and ASD affect your executive function. And so what is executive function? Executive function is your brain's ability to plan, prioritize, and organize. So if you're neurotypical, you might not even notice how often you're relying on that skill. But someone who struggles with executive functioning, with their executive functioning, will really have trouble starting and finishing tasks. And so task initiation is definitely part of the executive function. Self-monitoring, your ability to self-evaluate your own behaviors. Attention control, working memory, planning and prioritization. Emotional control, that's a big one. Organization, I have a very messy desk and I'm okay with that. And impulse control. Another big thing that those of us we call ourselves neurospices, or spices. Another thing that we deal with a lot is emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation tends to present as an emotional response that may seem very excessive compared to the situation at hand. I'm sure you guys have all known somebody in your lives or maybe you've overreacted to something, not really known why you've overreacted to it. Emotional dysregulation is the cause. Another thing is it's very difficult to calm somebody down who's having issues with their emotions. They tend to retreat and avoid those situations to avoid being triggered. They tend to fixate on the negative, negative self-talk. I'm not good enough, imposter syndrome, you name it, that covers that. Now, this is the one that I suffer from the most. Rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's sudden emotional outburst, and it's triggered by real or perceived criticism or rejection. And that perceived is a very important word, which is why I've underlined it, is because as somebody with ADHD, I observe the world differently than everybody around me. I'm well aware of noises outside. I feel everything that I'm wearing. Any noise can be a distraction. So I'm constantly processing all that information all at once, all day long. And many times in my career, I have felt that I wasn't good enough. And that this is the emotional outburst. Sorry, excuse me, I apologize. Having a tough day today. That's better. All right. Yeah. So rejection and dysphoria. I do suffer from this a lot, and this really becomes from I feel that you've rejected me in some way, shape, or form. Right? Either you've made a criticism, even if it's constructive and well-founded criticism of something I've done, and so that might trigger my RSD and cause me to have an emotional outburst. It can also cause you to be socially withdrawn, really low self-esteem. This is a big one. Those of us with ADHD, we struggle with our self-esteem constantly. We're been told most of our lives that, oh, well, you're not doing it right, or you're just not applying yourself was my favorite one that I've gotten over the years. And self-doubt, and rumination. I kind of lump those all together into one thing because they all tend to happen at the same time, at least for me. But with all that bad stuff that comes along with neurodiversity, there's a lot of good that comes along with it as well. And that would be hyperfocus. Love my lovely AI-generated hyperfocus man here. Thanks, ChatGPT. So hyperfocus is our superpower. It's our ability to laser focus in on one thing and one thing only and shut the rest of the world out. There are a couple caveats, though. It has to be something that has high intrinsic interest or passion. So I love what I do. I've been a Mac admin for over 10 years. I can focus on being a Mac admin. I can, a problem, especially under stress, when a problem occurs, right there. Anything that's a novelty or a challenge. I love tinkering with new things, puzzles, anything you want. And probably the biggest driver for me is a sense of urgency. I remember in high school, every single paper, actually high school and college, every single paper I ever wrote was written in less than 48 hours before it was due, regardless of its length. I once actually finished a 95-page senior project that I finished in less than 48 hours. But that's that sense of urgency. That sense of urgency kicks in, brain just goes, I can do this. It does have a couple of problems with it, though. One, it's very vulnerable to interruptions. Somebody calls me, hits me up on Teams, knocks on my door, one of my kids is screaming. That can break that hyperfocus. And once that hyperfocus is broken, it's incredibly difficult to get back. Time blindness is another vulnerability. Many times I have put my head down, hyper-focused on something, and realized that 6 hours have just passed, thinking only maybe an hour had gone. And also neglected basic needs. And that goes back to that time blindness. I don't really realize that I've been sitting there for 6 hours and maybe I should go take a shower and get clean, that kind of thing. So, and burnout is also, you're very vulnerable to burnout with hyperfocus. You can only do it for so long, and it's not something that can be willed on demand most of the time. So this brings me to the part of the talk where I'm going to talk about some of my own personal journeys in the workplace, being neurodivergent. And I'm going to share two stories. One is, I consider to be, they're both, I guess they were both kind of extremes on opposite ends. So I'll start with the negative one. Years ago, I was working for a higher education establishment in their managing their lab environments and Windows and Mac and Deploy Studio. So this was a long time ago. So, and I had a boss who was incapable of letting me be me, of letting me do things my own way. He would constantly interrupt me. He was constantly checking my work. He was looking over my shoulder. We moved into new offices, and he purposely put his desk so he could actually look at my screen as I was sitting there. This is the only time in my life that I've ever actually had to go to an HR to get help. And so I put up with a lot for a long time, and it got to the point where my boss at the time was trying to find things to fire me for. Anything. Didn't matter how little. So I ended up disclosing formally to HR. And that's a lengthy process, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And part of that process includes regular, reoccurring meetings with your supervisors and HR to make sure your concerns and your issues are addressed appropriately. And I distinctly remember one of those meetings where my boss looked at the HR lady and says, "How long are we going to have to do this for?" And she said, "Well, always, forever, because it doesn't go away." That was a hard time for me. I've had very many jobs that I've struggled with over the years, and it's mostly in dealing with supervisors or coworkers who perceive me as not doing work because I don't work the same way they do. I might dilly-dally for 4 hours and then churn something out in 20 minutes. But during that few hours, all this stuff's still churning in my head. I'm actually working on it, but I'm working on it in here. It's just not very apparent to everybody around me. Coming to a slightly more upbeat story, in my current position. And we recently had some changes in our hierarchy, and the gentleman who hired me became a director, and I started reporting to somebody else. We didn't get along. He's based out of India, so there was some cultural things that were involved with that. But I also don't think that he quite understood my thought process. So when I was hired at my current position, my director and I had long conversations about, this is how I work. This is, I may not work normal hours, I may work off hours whenever the mood strikes me, but I'm always available during normal work hours. So we set all these ground rules. And when it came time to switch to my new supervisor, we butted heads a lot, to the point where we basically had a screaming match over a Zoom call. Not really proud of that one. That was, thought that I had burned the bridge, and it's like, oh great, another job I've screwed up. And then he did something completely unexpected. We had a meeting with my director and him, where my director kind of served as a moderator, and I opened up to my boss. And I said, hey, this is me, this is what I need from you, this is what I'm expecting, this is what I can give you. He didn't really say anything in that meeting. I thought that he was ignoring me. I thought that he was just kind of brushing this off. Come to a week later, and he says, hey, do you have any recommendations of any books I can read on this? And he also said that he had watched my presentation from the Penn State Mac Admins Conference from last year, where I had given a talk with a colleague of mine on this exact subject. And he said he watched it. He wasn't told to watch it. He didn't have to watch it. but he did. And in that moment, everything that I had, any problems that we had, they disappeared. We now get along very well. We now have a great working relationship. And it's because we talked. So this is what is going to bring me to our next slide, which is self-advocacy. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to take the first step yourself. And it's not an easy step to take sometimes, because a lot of us feel shame for our issues. We feel like we don't fit in. We feel like we're not normal. But here's a bit on how to start. If you want to disclose to your employer, a couple questions you need to ask yourself. Why do I want to disclose? Am I disclosing because I want to get some sort of accommodation? Am I disclosing because I want my boss to understand me more? Numerous reasons. How much do I disclose? Do I need to be specific? Do I need to say I have ADHD with hyperactive tendencies, or sometimes it's easier to not use the technical terms and just kind of explain it as, hey, this is the way I think, this is the way I feel, this is how I work, this is the way my brain works, as opposed to, I have ADHD, because everybody's ADHD is different, right? I know tons of people with ADHD. We all have different things that we struggle with. Sometimes there's overlap, but we're all unique individuals. What do I expect to get out of this disclosure? As I said, am I looking for accommodations? Am I looking for more clear lines of communication? Accommodations. And who do I talk to? Do I talk directly to my supervisor? Do I talk to his supervisor or her supervisor? Do I go to HR? This also applies to coworkers as well. This doesn't necessarily have to be your chain of command, because I've had plenty of instances where I've had coworkers who, for some reason, just had daggers, like dagger eyes for me every time I would walk into a room, because they thought that I was lazy, they thought that I didn't know what I was doing, they thought that I wasn't good at what I was hired to do. And that's hard. So, as I mentioned before, I did disclose to one employer. And the reason you want to disclose to an employer, if it comes down to that, is so you can request something called reasonable accommodations. What is a reasonable accommodation? That's a great question. Hey. It's acquiring or modifying equipment or devices that will help you in your day-to-day job. It can be job restructuring. It can be part-time or modified work schedules. It can be reassigned to a different position. Maybe that's not the right fit for you. There's no shame in saying, this isn't the right job for me. But I also understand that in this day and age that you can get stuck in a job for various reasons, whether it's financial or geographical. And sometimes you have to make do with what you have. So that one's not always an option. Adjusting or modifying examinations, training materials, or policies. For me, I have a very hard time absorbing written material in a distracting environment. So for me, luckily right now I work from home. I have my home office. It's set up the way I want. I have my own distractions there that actually help me focus, believe it or not. Sometimes I have music playing. Sometimes I have the TV on. Sometimes I have both going on at the same time, and I can still focus on what I'm doing. But if you're in an office environment, this can be really important to you. And this could be things like noise-canceling headphones. Great option. Get some AirPods Pro. They help. It might mean not overloading that person with so much information that they get into this almost like deer in a headlight state, where I frequently will get into these positions where I have too many choices and you get stuck and you're just there like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to start this. I have like 15 tasks. Sometimes I need help with prioritization. And so that's where that kind of comes in. Readers and interpreters. These accommodations also apply to people who are blind, have any sort of physical disabilities as well as neurological disabilities. So this applies to everybody with a disability. And also making the workplace readily accessible and usable by people with disabilities. So breaking down a little bit more, that structured work environment that is important as well. So a lot of us thrive on predictability and consistency. And obviously I know being in IT that's not necessarily something that happens all the time, right? We want it to be consistent. We want things to work the way they're supposed to work. But things blow up occasionally and you need to jump into that hyperfocus mode to fix. So things like standard meeting times are really helpful. I have a daily 9:30 meeting every day. It's almost like a stand-up. Instead of, hey, let's schedule it for 2 p.m. Tuesday, and then the next one's different time. So that's important. If possible, agenda sent ahead of time so that we're not bombarded by everything that's happening in that particular meeting. If we know a little bit about what that meeting is about and we have an agenda, it's a lot easier for me specifically to be able to focus on that meeting and everything in it, because I know what we're going to talk about. And maybe I'll do some research ahead of time. Standard communication tools. It's one we still kind of struggle with where I'm currently at McGraw. We have both Slack and Teams. So luckily most of the people I interact with are on Teams right now, so I don't get very many of the, nobody's hitting me up on Slack and Teams, but at one point it was very confusing as to, okay, who do I contact on which service, and then they would contact me on different ones, and so standardization is very good. It's best to avoid a mixture. If you have one way of communicating that works best for you, try to stick to it. Obviously, I know this is always not possible, but this is something that I've asked for. Hey, if you say something to me in a meeting, can you follow it up with an email? To remind me. What's great now is we're trialing out the new Microsoft AI Copilot, and so it's automatically summarizing meetings for us. It's another great tool that unfortunately I wasn't able to add to this presentation before it came out. Okay, sorry, it's hard to read on this thing. Some more with structure, more things you can ask for visual accommodations. Task management or visual schedules to organize work. Again, we all have Outlook, we all have Gmail, whatever flavor you guys are using in your organizations. But this is important, something that you can stick to. For me, this isn't so great for me. I tend to be a Post-it note or a little scribble down kind of guy, so my desk is filled with little notes myself. So yeah, standardize your task assignment methodology. Things like Jira and ServiceNow and like ticket structures are very helpful for me because I have a list of things that I need to do. It's right there. I'm not going to forget anything because it's right there. And the biggest problem is sticking to it. So if you're going to try something, you got to do it all the way and not halfway. A lot of companies really struggle with this. Some have really well-established routines. I've worked in GitOps shops that, everything is regimented. So you do all your Git commits and Scrum environments. Scrum is very good for those of us with ADHD because it definitely breaks it down as to what we have to do and the amount of time we have to do it in. So it really makes you process and think when you're coming up with your stories for your whatever your sprint is. This one's a good one. Until there's a ticket, it's just a conversation. Could also rewrite that until there's an email or until there's, insert your own service there. But that comes back to that if with a ticket or some sort of email, something I can follow up on, something that I can see visually, hey, I have this to do. So I use flags, follow-up flags in Outlook a lot for that kind of thing. So some work options you can get with reasonable accommodations, flexible schedules is a big one. So that's kind of what I have right now. I am available from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for any and all issues that arise. I always have my phone on me. I'm always signed into Teams. I'm always available. But that doesn't mean I'm necessarily always 100% working on something during those hours. A lot of times, I'll do my research at night because for whatever reason, my brain functions better in the evening, where I can actually sit down and I can read documentation, and it's a better environment for me. So sometimes I'll use that. Mental health days. Mental health days are sick days. PTO is, don't be afraid if you are overwhelmed and you need help, or you don't feel that you just can't handle it for that day. Maybe if it's at all possible, take some time for yourself. I schedule focus time. So my schedule is blocked out. I have a 3-hour block every day that is blocked out in my Outlook schedule, so nobody can schedule a meeting with me during that time. And so I know I have that dedicated space where I'm not going to be interrupted by, or I don't have to attend a meeting. And sometimes I will put meetings in there, but that's my choice, right? Remote work. Probably the best thing that happened to me is the pandemic. It's kind of hard to say, but I have not worked out of an office since March of 2020. At first I thought I would be horrible because I have my kids running around, all this stuff would be distracting at home. The exact opposite is true. I'm actually more distracted when I'm in the office than I am at home. So I will frequently go back to our home office in Ohio, and it's hard for me to get work done there because there's a lot of distractions. There's buzz of overhead fluorescent lights and people coming and going, chitter-chattering, printers going off, you name it, I'll hear it. And you guys all seen Up, right? Doug the dog, squirrel. It's exactly like that. That remote work can actually be full or part-time as well. So, some sensory considerations for those of us when you're asking for accommodations. One is lighting. Fluorescent lights, they're evil. I think we can all agree on that, yeah? They buzz. Those lights that I'm looking at right now are highly annoying and distracting. Noise, so that noise-canceling headphones are great. Private offices, if possible. The orientation of your desk is also important. I can't work with a window. I always wanted a window in my office, but when I had one, it was a distraction. I would find myself constantly looking out of it, so I would actually face my desk away from the window. Believe it or not, smells. Strong perfume, food odors. All those can be issues for those of us with neurodivergence. Now, I've been talking about these accommodations, and what allows you to get these accommodations is something called the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's officially called the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 because it was ratified in 1990. It prohibits discrimination based on disability, and that disability, as I've mentioned before, is either physical or neurological. It doesn't differentiate. And it prescribes segregation, so they can't put me in my own, unless I ask for it, they can't separate me from a group just because I have ADHD. Harassment, and it also protects you from being fired or refusing to hire based on real or perceived disability. So, you guys have all seen those job applications, and it says, hey, do you require, we will provide you reasonable accommodations. This is what this is talking about. This all came out of that ADA Act in 1990. So it does require covered entities to provide reasonable accommodations. However, covered entity is any employer with 15 or more employees. So I'm sorry for those of you who work for 2-3 person shops. You might get somewhere, but you might not. And it does require accessible public accommodations. So things like handicap ramps, accessible bathrooms, falls into that category. Now, if you want to use the ADA and make an official make an official declaration to your HR department for accommodations. Just know it can be a bit drawn-out process. It does require a formal diagnosis. So that means you need to see a psychiatrist or psychologist and get any appropriate tests and have them document. This may or may not be covered by your insurance. So be forewarned on that. You need to provide that diagnosis to HR. And when you provide that diagnosis to HR, that would also be when you would say, hey, here's my diagnosis, here's what I'm asking for. This will also be followed by lots of meetings with your supervisor and HR to discuss your accommodations, to discuss how well your accommodations are going, and there'll be regular follow-ups. For me, it was once a month. And it was, hey, did things any better? What do you need? What can we do to help you? And it's a regular follow-up meetings. I'm getting ahead of myself, so. Interacting with others, advocating for others. So we've talked about advocating for ourselves, but we can also advocate for those of us around us. So how many in this room consider themselves neurodivergent? And how many neurotypicals? Would you say? Standard thought. I mean, it's weird. So those of you who don't consider yourself neurodivergent, you can really help out by advocating for your coworkers. Be available, be open, and be encouraging and respectful, because you don't know how long somebody's been struggling with their issues. You don't know what coping mechanisms they may or may not have, but you can point things out. If you see something going on, it's almost like terrorism. You see something, you say something, right? Don't ignore. That's kind of the brunt of my presentation. I got some Q&A time here for anybody who wants to discuss anything, but I want to close on this, which is just because we're different, it doesn't mean we're broken. It just means we're different. And we can still do everything everybody else can. So with that, we've got about 12 minutes or so for some questions or comments, stories you want to share, anything.
Yes, if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll come with the microphone.
And while he's bringing that mic over there, I should also mention that I do have a brain date scheduled tomorrow, but I think it's full, so anybody who wasn't able to get into it and talk about this stuff.
Well, first off, thank you for spending the last 45 minutes chatting about this.
Yeah,
I focus on assistive technology, so in hearing you speak of what could be helpful, I think I want to take the conversation a little bit further, but in addition to noise canceling headsets, what technology would help in your office or in an office environment that would allow our folks to do their best work?
It's really an individual thing. So, for me, it was noise canceling headphones. I also used, back in the day, I used one of those digital scribe pens that would digitize my handwritten notes. Sometimes I'll use an iPad to take notes on, things like that. But it really comes down to the individual person. So I can't say specifically for everybody, but for me, that's what it was. Yeah. One up front. Oh, also for anybody on the Slack channel, there is the Neurospicy channel. So we all get together and make each other feel good. So
I don't particularly have a question, more just a story, I guess.
Perfectly acceptable.
I work in a computer repair center, and a coworker of mine is neurodivergent, and it was pretty apparent to me when he had a breakdown during a repair, and I questioned him about what had happened, about what his breakdown was about, and he let me know that he had ADHD, or had, I'm sorry, not ADHD, well, he had that too, but he had autism. And he had never disclosed it to anybody at our office before. And I guess I encouraged him to let our HR department know about it. So he talked about it for the first time to our office. But I guess I just have struggled I just wanted to understand it more. So I've just been trying to learn more about it.
That's wonderful. That's the advocating for others right there. It's a great example of that. You know, you saw a coworker who was struggling. You encouraged them to follow to go reach out to HR to get the help that they needed. It's hard. A lot of us we live in shame. We don't. You know, for me, growing up in the 80s and 90s was terrible. You know, nobody understood me, and everybody thought I was not trying, or I wasn't applying myself, or I was rebelling against my parents for some reason, why that would come up. But, yeah.
He struggles a lot with repairs. It takes him a long time to get through them, and I guess that's one thing I don't know how to help him. I don't know how to help him through it, because obviously it's impacting customers, and that's one thing I guess that's one question I have, is I don't know how to encourage him and how to help him with that.
So there are, if he's formally diagnosed, he probably has access to occupational therapy options, which can help with that. But that would be something that you could discuss with HR for something like that. But sometimes there's just not much you can do. Sometimes they just need that extra time. Sometimes you just got to work with it, which is why sometimes it's not always, there's not always going to be a fix for some situations. Some situations you can get to like a happy medium, but you may not resolve all the issues. And then it really is specific to the job. So I mean, for something like that where you have a task that is timed, that is, for some people might be motivating. For me, I'd be going through those. But for somebody else, you know, it could be the exact opposite, so, yeah.
A couple of quick questions / bullet point thing, which first of all, thank you again for sharing this. What you talked about is something which I myself am currently in my late 30s going through, and I'm jealous of you figuring it out at 19. And I consider myself lucky that I have a great supervisor that's helped me with this journey, so it's also encouraging to hear that. Also, quick sidebar, you mentioned the neurodivergent channel on Slack. We also, at the DEI booth here at Jamf, have accessibility at Jamf stickers if you want it for your computer.
I'll stop by.
You should. We have a lot, and they're pretty swell. Also, just random curiosity, because I am also currently in this journey, is there like a copy of this slide deck that you'd be available to like ask
Yes,
for?
there is. So it may not be the JNEC version, but if you search for me, if you go to the PSU Mac conference page for the Penn State Mac Admins conference, I actually gave this talk at Mac Admins with basically the identical deck, just without the background. So you can definitely get it there. It's posted on the Mac Admin, the PSU Mac site, the PSU Mac Admin site. So.
Awesome, thank you.
And there's also a video recording on YouTube from this summer when I gave this talk as well as my talk from last summer as well.
What are some of the liabilities or pitfalls of officially disclosing a disability, especially a neurodivergent one, to HR or your supervisor?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I kind of glazed over it in my presentation. It can be stigmatizing when you disclose. So when you do disclose to HR, though, what you need to know is that HR will only inform your direct supervisor and nobody else. So you are protected by the ADA from harassment and retaliation. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But very often, your coworkers might look at you a little, might judge you because you got something that they can't get or something like that. So there are some pitfalls, which is why I encourage the non-formal approach of just talking with your supervisor and talking with your coworkers about your neurodiversity and what helps you, so that to help avoid that stigmatization.
I was curious, at the beginning you mentioned being sensitive to rejection, so I imagine it must be very complicated to go on stage like you did.
Yeah, it is. This is a long time coming. I was never a public speaker. I don't usually do this. For me, it was, I pushed myself. I actually took improv lessons, and I went through a whole year of improv training at Second City in Chicago. Which was a lot of fun, but it's also confidence building too. And it also helps that I gave this talk to the Penn State MacAdmins conference, which those of you who have been to it, it is the most friendly place on the planet. It's summer camp for nerds. So that also helped, the fact that I was able to do this in front of an audience and build my confidence up a little bit. But I'm still nervous. I stuttered a little bit and got off topic and distracted by the lights, but yeah. Squirrel. All right. Oh, I've got two back there. We have about 2 minutes and 50 seconds left, so you guys
I just wanted to recommend that for some of the folks who are trying to advocate, spinning up an employee resource group at your organization is a huge step in helping reduce the stigma. And for those who are trying to understand neurodivergency, a Microsoft engineer who used to work on XP and Windows NT actually wrote a book about becoming a successful IT person
Really? I didn't
with
know
having
that.
autism. His name is David Plummer, and it's called The Invisible Part of the Autism Spectrum.
Okay.
And he talks about how people in his life were like, Dave's just Dave, which I think a lot of people in the neurospicy community kind of run into, where it's like, well, that Dave's just being Dave, he's off fixing something. But having the informal talks, I'm on a part of a bunch of ERGs for neurodivergency at my organization. We self-advocate for each other and create a safe space with monthly Google Meets for people to come to a meeting. They can stim if they need to stim. We can bring up issues that we're having. We can talk about accommodations. Mm-hmm. And I would also recommend spinning up, if your group can do it, is resource libraries that have headphones, different types of lighting, fidget toys.
Yes, there's a U.S. government's website that accommodations.gov, I think I have to.
It's a great resource.
Yeah.
So definitely if you're trying to advocate, those are some steps.
So we got 1 minute left for one more quick one.
I just wanted to say thanks for doing this. It takes a lot of courage. Get up there. You're doing a lot of advocating for getting us out there to help advocate for ourselves and others. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to add that if this was... I'd like to think that it's this day and age that allows me to be able to do this and to come out and be vocal about it. Whereas when I was growing up, the stigmatization was strong. And so, I'm real happy to be able to do this, and I'm going to continue doing this as long as I can. This is will be my third presentation on this subject, so hopefully I'll continue on doing it. So thank you.
Everyone, and thank you, Roger.
Thank you.